Welcome back to Andertons TV. Now, the fact that you are watching this on YouTube means that my next guest needs no introduction whatsoever, as Rick's YouTube stats are somewhat phenomenal, with over 3 million subscribers now on YouTube and hundreds of millions of views over the last 6 or 7 years. So welcome to Guildford.
I appreciate it. I've been here before, so I just want to say this, that I sent Lee a picture that I found from me visiting here. I don't know how many years ago it was, but I was going through my pictures and I was like, Andertons, oh my gosh, I've been there before.
It was 30 years ago.
30 years ago, and I sent it to you.
Yeah.
Just happened to notice it in the background of a photo of a couple friends of mine that brought me here.
That's mad.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me.
No, honestly, it's a pleasure. I feel like, even though we probably started making YouTube videos slightly before you, your success has been meteoric, and so I'm constantly watching your videos, super jealous about some of the guests that you get on. But it's a pleasure to have you on. But I kind of feel the Rick Beato that we see on YouTube doesn't talk too much about life, before the YouTube days. You're very current in what you talk about, and I think you've really hit a vein with looking at the songs that you break down and talk about. But you had a reasonably successful career just in music before you discovered YouTube. So let's go back to the young Rick Beato. Maybe even let's go back to your really early childhood and talk about what music you grew up listening to and what inspired you to get into the music industry.
So I'm the second youngest of 7, and my oldest sister, my 2 oldest are my sisters, and there's 5 boys and 2 girls. And so I grew up in the 60s, and my sisters listened to the Beatles and the Stones, and that was the first music I remember hearing. And all of my siblings have different tastes in music, and we would constantly hear different stuff going from room to room. So I was exposed to everything that came out in that era into the 70s when I was in grade school, and then, junior high and high school. And I started playing the cello when I was in 69, so I was 7 years old. And I played that until 7th grade. So I was 13. I went to the acoustic bass. And then I picked up the guitar in 8th grade, so when I was 14 for the first time. And I loved music. On my mom's side of the family, 2 of her sisters were music teachers. One of her brothers is an excellent bass player. Her dad, my grandfather, played guitar. They weren't, my grandfather was not a professional guitarist, but we always had music going on. And I took up guitar, and my younger brother took up guitar right in the same time, and we just were obsessed with it. Still, my brother plays in a band, and I just was obsessed with music ever since then. So,
you obviously have an exceptional understanding of music. So kind of where did you study? But not, I would say the minority of guitar players or musicians, particularly guitar players, choose to follow that path. Most guitar players will end up just, getting a rough idea of playing by ear. So how did that happen?
So, I started playing by ear. I learned by ear, and then I was, when I was 16 or so, there's a guy in my neighborhood. I got on this list of doing odd jobs for people, and I was mowing lawns. And there's this guy that lived a few streets away named Tom Rizzo, and I was mowing his lawn. I went in to get paid, and he had all these guitars and amps in his house. And I said, well, you're a guitar player? He goes, well, I own a music store.
Right.
I said, where is it? He said, it's over in Pittsford, T. Rizzo Music. And he's like, do you play guitar? I said, yeah. He said, play me something. I played. Then he picked up the guitar and played, and he was amazing. And I was like, wow. And he was playing all this jazz stuff. And I said, I'd love to learn that. He said, come and take lessons at my store. So I started taking lessons, and then I did that. But I was still playing by ear. Mm-hmm. And I ended up getting, I was a terrible student in school. And I was like, what am I going to go to school for? And I couldn't really get into college because my grades were so bad. And I decided to go to school for music. I went 1 semester on a track scholarship, and then I changed schools and went into music.
And where was that? Which school was that?
It was a school called Ithaca College. So I got a degree in classical bass, my undergrad degree, and then I did a master's degree at New England Conservatory in jazz guitar. And then, I got, when you go into music school, you have to do all these things so you become a very good reader, and you're playing an ensemble. So I played in orchestra all the time. I hardly did any guitar in my undergrad. It was really all bass and playing other instruments that you had to play to be a music ed major to get a music teaching degree. So, but I always played different styles starting in high school. Started out as a rock guitar player, and then I learned jazz and fusion and all different types of things. So
it's interesting because I see the jazz influence. When you talk about the guitar, you can see that jazz influence that comes across. And yet, when you look at perhaps some of your career within music, it didn't seem to be terribly jazzy. And as the artists you were working with definitely weren't from that sort of genre. But so when you graduated from school, was there a sense that you might try and make it as a player?
I thought about it for about a month or so. And I went back to visit some friends in Ithaca, where I'd done my undergrad, and my old guitar teacher, or the head of the jazz department, offered me a position teaching there in the fall. And I thought about it for a couple of weeks, and I was like, I'll try it out. And I ended up teaching jazz studies there for 5 years. I conducted the big band, I taught improv, I taught ear training, all these different things. And then I was like, well, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And I started writing songs with a buddy of mine. I got signed to a publishing deal as a songwriter.
Cool.
And then I embarked. I moved to Atlanta in '94. I got signed in a major label band that ended up, nothing really happened with that, except I got really into music production then, which I thought was a perfect blend of my skills of being a teacher and communicating with students, and then working on songs, which I love the most of. And then because of that, the era that I started in full-time, really 99 till 2016 when I started my YouTube channel, I did mostly metal bands. And it started out new metal bands. I mean, I did a lot of singer-songwriters. I did all, Americana type bands, but it was a lot of metal, which is funny for a guy that grew up in the, listening to the Stones and the Beatles and all that, and Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, whatever, but then doing new metal bands that were all down-tuned. Everybody's playing, drop C, drop B flat, drop A flat, and then you get the 8-string guitars in there, and learning how to record those things was really fascinating.
Were you able to draw on this greater understanding of music to help produce those records, or was it really just a new learning experience?
Both, I think, because if I work with a progressive metal band, for example, I understood the drumming parts, the odd time signatures. I knew what kind of parts would work together. I'd know how to, the things from the ear training part of it would be, well, how do you get these guitars to differentiate themselves? If you do overdubs, maybe do a hard panned set of guitars, then you have some other overdub guitars that need a completely different type of range, different types of distortion, and you want everything with clarity and punch and power. And what types of bass, a lot of times you'll have bass with distortion on it, and getting everything to fit in the mix, that to me is the most fascinating part of it. I loved the engineering and mixing part of it too. So this was all part of my training, is learning how to do that. And I absolutely loved the technical part of it as much as the music part.
I'm guessing you don't have time to, but do you ever do any engineering or mixing for people sort of nowadays?
So I haven't done anything since I started my YouTube channel, but I just got my Pro Tools rig back up and running, which has been a real nightmare because it's difficult nowadays to have because Pro Tools rigs runs with these PCIe cards, and unless you have a Mac that has, like a Mac Pro that has the slots for them, you have to buy an expansion chassis, and there's all these problems that are inherent with that. That's why people use Logic, and I use Logic and Ableton as well, but I prefer to use Pro Tools for editing. Anyways, I have my studio back up and running. I'm going to start making some recording videos again, finally.
That would be cool. And presumably videos of you making...
Yes, yes. And I'm looking forward to that because I miss the recording part of it.
So you had, let me get my brain, you had about 15, no more than that, nearly 20 years then of engineering.
Yeah.
What was, what was your life like? Was that just going to be what you would do? Maybe, one or two of the records will be absolutely huge and, that'll be your pension. I don't know. What's in your head at this point?
So when I started at that time, people still sold records, but around 2005, after Napster happened, the major label budgets that I was doing, one of the early bands that I had success with, I produced a band called Shinedown, and I wrote a few songs on their first record, and that sold a couple million copies. I had a few other gold records as a producer, but the sales really started to drop off, and the budgets for major label records started to drop off around 2005 or so. And the money that you would make from the back end of it just would disappear. And now with streaming, it's really, as a producer, since you're only making 3 percentage points, it was difficult to really to do that kind of work, especially as rock music started to change and the things became fragmented because of streaming and everybody's getting fed music through algorithms. So there you get these real niche kind of artists. So it's really interesting.
So was the sort of decision to do the YouTube thing drawn of necessity or just curiosity?
No, it's I just started doing it on a whim, and I started making some videos, and I'd make them at night when I was doing sessions. And sometimes I'd upload a video, and then one of my friends would call me and said, there's 5 minutes in the middle of the video where you're just not even on screen. It looked like you walked out of things. Like, oh. Then I'd take the video down and fix the edit because I fell asleep while I was editing it. And then I put it back up. That happened many times. You have like 10 typos in your video. Take it down and put it back up again. So that was kind of the beginning of it. But my channel caught on pretty fast because of the stuff. Because I did really advanced, music theory, composition, ear training stuff at the beginning. It was nothing about recording or song breakdowns or anything like that. It was really more of stuff that I hadn't thought about since I stopped being a music professor in 1992. So,
was it that sense when, it seems mad looking back on it now, because they often say sometimes the simplest ideas are the best ones. But when you started just doing those breakdowns of, best 10 rock guitar intros or whatever like that, and all of a sudden you get your first video that hits whatever it is, 100,000 million, whatever the views is that it hits. Did you feel like by that time, you were expecting to see that kind of growth and success, or did it still come as a big surprise?
I think it's a surprise. I think it's still a surprise. You make a video. I think my biggest video is almost 18 million. It's a video on the top 20 acoustic guitar intros. And these are kind of lists that I make with my friends that, what's the best guitar intros, or what's the best this or that. I think most people, when they're I'm sure you do too with your friends, you talk about all your favorite, guitar things or bass things or drum things. And I play all these different instruments, so I make lists up for all different kinds of instruments. But the success of a video, I never know if anything's going to do well or not. I just make videos that I am interested in.
When was the first time an artist got in touch with you that was perhaps a hero of yours and said, do you want to interview me? Or, through a publicist or something like that? Because that's the bit where you go, hang on a second, I need to pinch myself.
Yeah, well, the first person I interviewed was Steve Vai. And Steve reached out to me. He saw a video of my son Dylan. And he reached out to me.
Hasn't everyone seen that video?
I guess.
Everyone with an internet connection has seen that.
He said, I've never seen anything like that. Can you tell me about that? And we did a video chat, and he was like, can I meet Dylan? So I remember going upstairs. I don't know if I've ever told this story. I remember going upstairs to my wife and saying, can you tell Dylan to come downstairs? Dylan wouldn't come downstairs. He was 8 or 9 and stuff. And it's like, there's guitar player Steve Vai. My wife doesn't know who Steve Vai is. So I was like, he's a world famous guitar player. He wants to meet Dylan. And she's like, Dylan, just go downstairs. She's like, all right. And he goes downstairs and he had like a Pokemon shirt on or something. And Steve starts, hey, Dylan, how are you? And Steve was so great and engaging and talked to Dylan. He was talking to him about video games and things. And then Steve and I were talking, and I said I was thinking about doing some interviews. I think my channel had probably about 80,000 subscribers or so at the time. And he said, well, I can be your first guest if you like. It's like, great. So so I started with Steve Vai.
I can see Steve. I don't know, when we had the first time Steve was on here, I remember he was fascinated. I was asking him about, what artists he listened to, and he said Jacob Collier.
Yeah.
So I can see that sense of just, he's very, very interested in what's new. How are people thinking? You're sort of thinking he's going to cite, I don't know, Eddie Van Halen or whoever as his kind of, idol type thing. But he does want to talk about,
I think it came down to, I thought about that actually when you were saying that. I think because Steve started doing transcriptions for Frank Zappa. So his thing about ear training and doing transcriptions, he's fascinated by people with great ears that are able to take down things, like hear, Dylan can hear a 12-note chord and name all the notes. And that to Steve was fascinating, right? So it goes right back to his beginning of kind of getting the Zappa gig.
Yeah.
Because of that.
You must be I know you were saying that, your kids are going through a bit of they're not really showing any signs of being super interested in music at the moment. And, we all have had that, or we are all going through that experience with our children, sadly. But Dylan must have grown up. That's obviously a heavy influence from you somehow, whether you even consciously realize that you did it. You can't just have that innate ability you've got to know what the notes are called for a start, let alone what pitch they are.
Well, it's interesting because I never mentioned note names to him. I just noticed that when he was 3, we were driving the car one day. It was about 3.5 or so, and I'd ask him to sing songs, and he would sing them, and it just hit me that these were in the right keys.
And, you mean he's singing them, not singing along? He's just singing.
I was like, hey, Dylan, sing the intro to Star Wars. And he'd sing it, and I'd go, sing this. We were listening to John Williams things, and then I was like, well, sing the Superman intro, and he's like, da, 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 da. And I was like, that's in the right key. It just starts on G, goes between G and C. I think it's the right key. I check on my phone, and then I asked him a third song, this thing called the Excavator song. They like this little kids thing. So I was like, there's no way you could sing 3 songs in the right keys back to back that are in different keys. Turn the car around. I go home. I go over to the piano and I hit the note B flat. And I said, what note is it? He goes, Superman. And it starts on a big B flat. You start Star Wars. And it starts on a big B flat major chord, Star Wars does. It's mainly you hear B flat because there's 22 B flats. There's 3 Ds and 2 Fs in the chord. So the way it's weighted, the first chord is weighted to make it sound like the note B flat. And then I played the note G and he goes, Superman, instantly. And I hit C and he goes, the Excavator song. And I hit A flat and he goes, third note of the Excavator song. And I said, oh my God, he's got perfect pitch. And I had my assistant, GL, come in. I was like, try these notes. And he did it. He's like, oh my God. So over the next like 10 minutes or so, I taught him the names of all the 12 notes. I said, when you hear this note, Star Wars is called B flat. Okay. You hear this note, Superman's called G, okay? Excavator song's called C. And then this one's C sharp, this one's E flat, this is blah, blah. And that was it. Perfect. He already had perfect pitch.
And now he just likes sneakers.
Right. like all 15-year-olds.
Exactly. Oh, never mind. It's like, he'll work it out. He will work it out.
So, but the perfect pitch thing is interesting, though, because I think a lot of people thought, oh, I'm teaching Dylan note names or anything. He had perfect pitch, and then it's just a matter of learning what the names of the notes are.
Well, it's probably in the genes somewhere, isn't it? So look, so Steve Vai, again, it's always, How did you feel? You know, like, you know, it's, I mean, it's not like you've had a career not working. You know, you've been in the music industry. You've obviously met some well-known artists, but it kind of, Steve Vai's like, you know, he's the sort of royalty level guitar player. So what are you, you know, how are you feeling inside at this point?
It's
nervous or?
Well, it's, you know, it's funny because I never really got nervous with any of the players that I've met. Because most of the people are, no, every person I've ever met, interviewed are really nice. Mm-hmm. And whether it's Brian May or Sting or whoever, they've just been nice people. And they're really relatable. When I meet them, they're you know, very conversational and no one, I've never interviewed anybody that or met anyone that had any kind of attitude or anything like that. So, which is really cool. It's so yeah, that part of it. But I don't get nervous at things typically. I don't know why, but I think I'm just, I have a I did this show here in London a few days ago, and I was getting ready to go out on stage, and my daughter Layla was 10. She's like, "Are you nervous?" And I said, "No, I don't get nervous at these." And she's like, "How come you don't get nervous?" And I said, "I don't know, because I know about what I'm going to talk about." And so there's nothing to be nervous about.
That explains why I'm nervous all the time.
But I thought about it, I was like, why don't I get nervous? Because I know what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So, and that's really the, you know, and when I'm talking to someone, if I'm interviewing somebody, I only interview people whose music I like and I'm really familiar with. And so that's a big thing.
I think we've both shared the experience of finding that if you just want to talk about music and guitars or pedals, every single guitar player wants to talk about that.
Yeah.
Whether you're Brian May or someone that's been playing for 5 minutes, I think the attitude or the defenses that artists build up is because they're ready for the question about their girlfriend or their boyfriend or their the clothes they wear or their drugs they used to take. You know, it's like, and I think if you're just going, I'm really not interested in anything like that.
Well, I only talk about music, but I love gear. It's funny because I don't talk about gear very often, but I love coming to shops. That's why I came here 30 years ago. That's why I came here again. And I love gear. You can tell from looking in the background of my studio.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a collector. I buy things that I like the sound of and that I would use as a producer. But I have a lot of guitars. I have a lot of amplifiers. I've got 10 drum sets. I've got bass amps and everything. And I love recording these things as well. And when I sit here and I look at everything, I mean, I pretty much know what everything is in here. And I'm always looking for new things. We talked about a pedal today that I had never seen before, and I'd heard about it. I just heard about it in a video today. And I'm interested. Well, I've never heard about this, you know, and it's fun to hear about new stuff and try out new gear.
Well, I think we'll cycle back to the gear thing because I think it would be remiss not to try and do some sort of desert island rig thing with you or whatever. Maybe there's some stuff in here you want to plug in and see what it sounds like. But so your channel now, I mean, it's gone crazy, really. You know, you can go to your channel. You're still doing the sort of the top 10 style videos, which are always popular.
I call countdown videos.
Yeah, you've got, you know, there's always an artist that, you know, that has recently appeared on, you know, and the interviews they're very different again to the kind of interview that you'll get if you go and watch a Saturday Night TV style interview with that artist. They're much longer format, much more interesting as a musician. The Steve Lukather one, by the way, that's my favorite. I like, not only is he probably my favorite musician that you've had on, he's so relatable too. You must, in fact, tell us about, because here's a guy that sold countless millions of albums, played on all the biggest hits in the 80s, and, you know, it's like, and yet he's just a regular dude sitting there.
Steve is great. So I've known Steve for probably about 6 years or so, but only through email and chatting and things like that, and on video. And then the first time I ever met him in person was actually the day I interviewed him. And we went out to breakfast, and then we did the interview, and then we had dinner. But in the in-between time, we found out Jeff Beck died.
Right.
So right after the interview, and then we had dinner together that night. And Steve is just a phenomenal guitar player, but just has come up with some of the most creative rhythm guitar parts. Like everything about it, about he's just so brilliant, and he just comes up with the stuff in the spot. He did that solo thing. I thought, well, I want to get him to play on something. So I was talking to my younger brother, John. He's like, why don't you have him play on Running with the Night like he did? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, there was a Lionel Richie. If you go to Spotify, there's an instrumental version of the song. I said, no way. He said, yeah. He goes, you can just loop a couple sections together. And I was over at Tim Pierce's house. I was doing a video with Tim, and Nigel, Tim's stepson, edited together the sections for me. So I added on a thing. I was like, okay, Steve, I want you to solo on something. And he just had his guitar rig set up, and they had a monitor right next to him. And I was like, well, let's check it out. And we were rolling the cameras, and the guy hit play in the control room. He had no idea what it was, and he immediately started playing, and that's the solo he played. Didn't say, what key is it in? And he only did one take on the Running with the Night Lionel Richie solo back in 1983. And does a completely other improvised solo with no wrong notes, right off the cuff, without even saying what key is it in, It's unbelievable.
Oh, man.
But this, the joke that Jay Graydon used to say, who was a big, really dear friend of Steve's, and a great guitar player and musician, producer. He said, before there were Pro Tools, there were pros.
That is a great quote.
Yeah,
that is a great quote.
I don't know if I think that's his quote though, but Luke can play a guitar part perfectly, making it up on the spot, then they become these songs that you hear on the radio forever. And he plays them, he just, the rhythm parts he comes up with and everything, and Human Nature, whatever, he just comes up with it and plays them flawlessly, and it's just so beautiful.
He's another level, isn't he?
Yeah.
So, anyway, we'll talk again a little bit more about maybe who's your sort of, who haven't you interviewed yet that you really want to, but tell me about this, I'm sorry I couldn't make it, by the way, but tell me about the show in London, because I'm just like, this whole YouTube thing's just gone to some whole crazy other level now. You've been booked to do, sort of an evening with Rick Beato things in big theatres around the world. It's just...
Well, I did, I had some guys from Live Nation reach out to me in the New York office last year in January. And there's about 5 guys or so. We got on a Zoom call, and they all follow my channel. And they said, would you be interested in doing some live shows? We do these with podcasters, and they do really well. And I said, what would I do? Come out, talk to the audience, do a song breakdown, do Q&A. And I said, I don't know. It seems kind of weird. Well, I guess, okay, I'll try one out. So they booked this place in New York. And it's funny because Adam, who's one of the guys he was one of the guys that booked the show, he's like, if you need backline, my father-in-law can provide it. And I was thinking, like, well, who's his father-in-law? Well, it's Mitch Colby.
Right.
This is his father-in-law who owned Park Amps. He sold Park Amps out. But I have a couple of Mitch's Parks that are fantastic amplifiers, and so our backline were these Park Amps, and so I just started. I've only done 5 of them. I did New York and Chicago, LA, Seattle, and now London. That's it.
It's still cool, man.
Yeah.
Is there a sense that the channel will just keep evolving and new ideas will come on, or do you think you kind
I hope so.
Yeah, because I think with Andertons we kind of we what's the right word? We have these conversations around, should it evolve or does it need to stay as what it is? Because it naturally there's never an end of content for us to shoot, because as long as manufacturers bring out new guitars and pedals and amplifiers, it's like there's always something new to talk about. But there's also a sense of like, well, at what point does that just become boring, and do we need to just change it up for the sake of changing it up? But how does tell me how you feel
Well, I've started doing more interviews lately, just because this year is kind of a thing that I'm doing more of. So every year I did a couple of years where I did a lot of what makes us sound great, and I've done the countdown videos, and now I'm doing more interviews, and I think I just keep finding things that are interesting, and we'll keep evolving those. But I will say this, that when I came in today, I saw some Final Cut Pro editing tricks that I had never seen before. So I went to school, and I didn't even realize these things that you can do in Final Cut for editing, and I love that. That's the thing, is that people don't realize this. I love the editing part of making the videos, even though I'm not very good at it. And there's just always so much stuff to learn, whether it's with guitar, whether it's with gear, or recording, or video making. There's so many things to learn.
We should give a shout out to the editors out there, including the Andertons guys as well, because you trust me, you can see the same video edited well or badly, or maybe not even badly, but just not as creatively as it could have been edited, and it's like 50% of the whole video is...
That is so true.
The edit.
The first thing I did when I came in is I started asking questions, and I'm seeing these different shortcuts to do, and I was like, what? Wait, where do these lines go? Well, this is so that things don't interfere with things on your social media things. Like, my God, is that in Final Cut Pro? Yeah. So I'm going to take away all these new ideas for the next 1,200 videos that I make, and hopefully they'll be far better than my other ones. But yeah, that's a thing that we don't talk about that much, is that there's so much production work to do, especially in music YouTube videos.
The top 10 best edited videos. There we are.
You know what? That would actually be great. Top 10 best edited music YouTuber videos.
We won't even that. Will we get into the top 10?
But there's so many things to think about, right? So if you play music and you're talking, you have to balance it out. So you try not to talk while the music's playing, but sometimes you have to talk when the music's playing. So then you have to duck the music down, and it has to sound natural, and then you have to be able to hear your voice clearly. Then you have to put a limiter on the voice so it's not jumping all around, but it can't sound like it's getting so squished that it's got all this background noise in it. So there's so many. This is like the engineer part of my brain that goes right to that. How do you do this? What's the best way to do it? You take the audio out and put it in Logic or Final Cut Pro and fix it first, put it back in, then start editing the video. But I love that stuff.
No, I can honestly say I've never edited a single video in my entire life.
Wow.
Yeah,
Lee, that's amazing.
From day
You're
one.
Lucky.
Yeah, I've always had the good fortune to have good people. But I'm interested as well, because one of the things I've always liked with the Andertons videos is the dual presenter thing.
Yeah.
And not scripting it and just sort of seeing what happens.
Yeah.
And all the best videos that we have are the magic, where just two presenters are just really on fire one day. So which is your favorite? I mean, you don't really have like a wingman as such, do you? You have guests, but what's the
what's the favorite kind of video to make for me? I think my favorite kind of videos are when I'm either talking about a song or a player, or when I'm just doing talking about a topic that's something that's interesting to me. Whether it's I'm trying to think of. I just talked about this Nuno Betancourt solo that people have been talking about. Did a video on that, or just anything that my friends are talking about. I like making videos on. But with your videos, when I'm watching them, I'm always thinking about this: what goes into making them. And you have two people talking, you have two people playing guitar a lot of the time, and then you have the amps close mic'd, you have the lavalier microphones on, you have room mics and everything. It's my first thing I did when I came in here is I took pictures of everything, because I'm absolutely fascinated by how people make their videos. And your videos look so good, and they sound great. And when people are talking over one another, you know, you have to have lavs to isolate the things. But this goes back. It's just like music production. It's so similar.
Yeah, I think that we get told off for talking over each other all the time, and I think it's because YouTube tries to subtitle what we're saying, so people where English isn't their first language.
Yeah.
And so of course, as soon as we talk over each other, it's just impossible. So I apologise. We'll try harder in the future. Let's talk about gear.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love talking about gear.
Half of me just thinks to myself,
let's talk about gear.
Yeah, it's like these guys will know, you know, everything there is to know about your channel. So let's talk about gear. So I'm going to quick fire you some questions, and then we can go a bit deeper. So first electric guitar you ever owned was
a black Les Paul Custom.
What?
Yeah, used. I got it. Well, there was, you know, this is 1978, and Tom Rizzo, the guy who I took lessons from, he got it through his music store for $400 used, $325 used. I don't know what year it was, but I think it was early 70s or so. It was really beat up, and I worked. My mom helped me out with it, and I worked bagging groceries to save up the money for it. So
it's like learning to drive in a Porsche 911 or something, isn't it? It's like,
well, I started, my first guitar was a 12-string, a Penco 12-string.
Wow.
That had a three-piece back on it. It was $120. I got that in 76, I think it was. And then, so I learned on 12-string, which is very weird.
Yeah.
And then when I got my Les Paul, maybe it was 77 I got the Les Paul, but I think it was early 70s or so. Then I gave it to my brother John, and I bought a newer white Les Paul Custom that I got through the same store again. And that was about, I want to say $600 or something and everything. But I worked all the time and was saving money working at grocery stores. And
that's the Paul Reed Smith response to whenever anyone says, I can't afford one of your guitars, Paul just says, well, you're not working hard enough for it.
That was it. I mean, my dad worked for the railroad. You know, he and my mom worked in this canning factory.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have money for things like that. So you just go out and that's what you do. You go out and work and you earn it and
it's
and
a
you
good
get the
ethos.
things. But I mean, it's weird to say, what was your first electric guitar? And I'm like, black Les Paul Custom. And I'm like, what?
So your first gigging rig, what was the rig you had to do your first gig with?
My first gigs, I would borrow gear from people and stuff. So, you know, like Fenders, you know, and have distortion pedals and stuff like that. MXR is based in Rochester, New York, where I'm from. So everybody had, my first effects pedal was a MXR flanger. And everybody kind of had the Distortion Plus, the flanger, and the Phase 90. So those were kind of the three first effects I got. And then I got a delay pedal after that. I mean, I pretty much have all the same things too. I still have the flanger I got in '78 because you heard Van Halen and had to have that flanger. And I loved Frampton. He used the Phase 90, and so the thing is that I think people don't realize that I mean, we didn't have that many options. It wasn't. You had Fender and Gibson and then you have knockoff brands that were made very good copies of these guitars and stuff. And you had Gretsch and you had, I mean, there were things, Univox guitars and things like that were out. But having a Gibson, most of my friends that played instruments, they played, you know, Ludwig drums, they played Fender basses, and they played Gibson guitars or Fender guitars, and that was it, you know.
Yeah. The choice was much more limited, for sure.
That's right.
So what is, let me just think, are we going to go most valuable or sentimental? One might even do both. So what's the most sentimental guitar? The one that if the house was burning down, you'd run back in and get?
Well, the most sentimental guitar, I don't know if I'd go back in and get, but that's kind of a weird answer. So I have this classical guitar that I got in 1977, a Guild classical that I love playing. I've rarely played it. I don't know if I've ever played it in any of my videos, but I like just playing on it. It's it's a good sounding guitar. And then I've got a 1957 country western Gibson that I've had for about 30 years or so. And that guitar is, I mean, it's been refinished and stuff, and you know, it has new tuners on it and everything. It's not valuable in the way that, you know, but it's an amazing sounding guitar, and it's in my biggest video. So.
And is that the one that you would run back in and grab?
That's probably the only one I'd run back in and grab.
So
I don't even know if I'd run back in and grab an instrument, to be honest with you. I like get the kids and my wife and the dogs and the cats out.
That's an interesting one. So, yeah. So how do you even do you view a guitar as something beyond a tool, or is it's just a tool?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's ones that are more comfortable. It's funny because people like, Rick, you play eights? And I was like, yeah, I play eights on some guitars and nines on some, and my acoustic guitars have 13s on them. And like, what kind of picks do you use? Oh, I use like whatever pick I pick up. I have all different gauges, but I use these Max Grips Dunlops. And as I've gotten older, it's harder. I need more grip. I can't play a Tortex pick or anything like that. I can't play a Fender, you know, mediums or Fender thins anymore. They just don't have enough grip on them. So I use those I think they're called Max Grips. Yeah. They have they're like sandpaper almost on them.
I had a real Plectrum epiphany a few years ago. I'd gone through the whole buying expensive Plectrums and having the wooden ones and the acrylic ones and the stone ones and you know, like $20 Plectrums and all this kind of stuff, and a real sense of like, if I haven't got the $20 Plectrum, I can't. And then I don't even know what it was one day, but one day I just picked up whatever the Plectrum was that was closest. It was the cheapest, plasticest, you know, and I just forgot about what the Plectrum was and played better. And I've really, sorry, expensive Plectrum manufacturers, but I literally now, I almost make a conscious decision never to not, you know, to not even feel like there's a kind of Plectrum I need to play.
Right.
So I can't use like really, really flappy ones. I can't really use, but just anything that isn't that, I feel, and just don't think about it, because I don't know. Although Pete, you know, who's obviously, you know, been a professional guitar player all his life, absolutely has a type of material Plectrum to use depending on the sound that he thinks the producer would want to try and get. So, and I'm guessing with your producer hat on, you probably have, you know, said to guitar players, I don't know, try different Plectrum.
Well, usually I say, just give me the guitar and I'll just play their parts. If they can't get it to sound right, I hate to say that, but that's what
you've done. Is that what happens?
Oh yeah,
in the real world.
Yes.
So, wow.
That's been happening since the beginning of time. This is no epiphany or anything. That honestly, you know, up through the 90s, until Pro Tools, until they had Beat Detective, drummers got on major label records would always get replaced by session drummers. They would. I mean, you know, rarity. You know, it's Dave Grohl played on Nevermind, and I'm not saying that the drummers of, you know, you know, Matt Cameron played on the Soundgarden records. Okay, not that, but on a lot of rock records, drummers would come in. The drummers for the bands would come in, and the producers would say, no, they can't be on the record. And then they'd usually quit, and they'd get a session guy to come in, Josh Freese, Kenny Aronoff, whoever it was that would come in and play all the drums on it. The drummer would quit, and then there'd be a new drummer that would come in and play the drum parts that run the record. I mean, that's just the way it's done. So if I produce the history of producers fixing people's parts, if I needed a part done where the person couldn't play it in tune or something, and it'd be like, I'd say, give me the guitar. And I'd tune it up. It'd be perfectly in tune. I hand it back to them. They play. It's all out of tune. It's like a touch of a blacksmith, right? And so I would say, all right, just give me the guitar, and I'd play. And they'd be relieved. It was amazing. They would be relieved if I fixed their parts.
Do you get an extra point on the record if you did? No,
I never would credit myself or anything like that. I never wanted to be that guy or anything. But I wanted to sound good, and I want the band to sound good. So if they couldn't play the parts well, if they couldn't play them in time or in tune, I would fix them, or I'd punch in parts that they would have trouble with, and they would be. I said, just let me see your guitar. Let's play it like this. And then they'd be like, oh, let's just keep that. Okay, fine. So.
What's the best guitar you own? I know it's a subjective.
The best guitar I own is probably my signature guitar.
How did I know that wasn't coming?
No. No, it's my favorite guitar to play is my signature guitar. I like Les Paul Specials, double cuts, and and this has changed with age because as I'm gonna be 61 here pretty soon this month, and Les Pauls are very hard to. I don't play standing up anymore. Whereas I used to gig and always play standing up, but I sit down all the time, and the Les Paul is just hard to hold, especially when I'm doing a lot of videos that I have to do for Instagram, and you have to get in a 9x16 frame, right? And I did this thing for a couple of years where I held my guitar up like this, and I played. It was like I can't play with vibrato like this. My playing really was not good. Trying to do that. So I went back to playing normally, and I just learned to edit it better and just move the camera around and stuff. My assistant Billy will do that. But I have a yellow Les Paul double cut that I like, and I love Les Pauls. I've got I have an SG, a 1965 SG that's a great playing guitar, and I've got a couple custom Strats that I play. I've got a couple Telecasters that I love. So I pretty much every guitar in my studio is something that I've had for a long time that have been on many records.
I think your comment about Fender need to design the Insta-Strat, which is a guitar that works in portrait mode when the camera's still fairly close to you. There you go, Fender, you can have that for next year's NAMM show. Oh, you won't be there, so let's not do that.
What do you think about portrait mode, about when you do things like short form?
Yeah, I don't like it.
Right?
I don't like shooting videos in portrait mode because, like you say, you want, I do stuff in my office where I just balance my phone on my desk and
You're kind of locked into certain angles to get the whole guitar.
I feel awful. I feel like I'm very conscious that I haven't managed to include the headstock in the so I'm not getting any branding across for not that I'm paid to or whatever, but my guitar salesman brain can't help myself.
Right.
But, so I'll do this thing where I'll kind of play like Hank Marvin down at the camera just to try and get the headstock in camera, but even then that's unnatural.
Yeah.
So it's like landscape is designed for guitar.
Designed for guitar, yeah. But there are certain angles that you can do with in that mode when you're doing the vertical mode that will get the whole guitar in. But you really can't see stuff that's played up there. So what I've done now is I just film in landscape, and then we just key gate or whatever it's called, keyframe the thing and move it around.
I don't even know what that means, but I will find out so that I'll do that in my next.
But I loved all these things. I love playing different guitars, and I find that if I play guitars with light strings for a few days, and then I want a guitar that's got some stiffer action to play, because I feel like I play different things on different guitars. That's why I use different picks as well. Plectrums. I'm sorry.
Well, picks and plectrums. And what's a pick? Yeah, pick in Danish is something completely different, isn't it, Pete? Yes, I thought so. Yes.
You didn't ask me about amps.
No, and your
love
studio
amps.
Now. We are kindred spirit here, and as are everybody in the room here. The whole amp thing, is it irrelevant now?
No.
So tell why I am constantly abused and tormented on YouTube that plugins are amazing because they all sound the same, they all sound perfect, and they're cheap and blah 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 blah. So why?
Okay, so I have all the plugins, pretty much. I've got all the foot modelers, so I've got all the rack things, and I have the real amplifiers. Now I'm lucky because I have enough room, and I have Neve mic pre's. I've got professional microphones, and I have 19 412 cabinets, and I can put them up, and I've recorded guitars professionally on major label records for decades, and so I know how to get a good guitar sound in 20 seconds, right? If I put up my 71 Marshall JMP with my 71 cabinet with greenbacks in it, it's going to sound great. Pretty much wherever I find the best speaker or the two speakers, because if I double mic something, most of the time I'll mic different speakers unless I'm using a Royer and a 57. But I'll, for phasing, I'll put the 57 on the dust cover between that and the cone, and then the other one, a 421, I'll put on a adjacent speaker, maybe on the bottom, but put it on the, in between the two edges, and I'll blend that to get the mid-range and to get the bite of the 57. Or I'll use a condenser mic and do a similar thing like that. I mean, sometimes I'll mic the same speaker, but it's just very quick. But I know exactly where the things go on every single of the 19 cabinets I have. I know what speakers are in, if it's 65 watt selections, if it's Fanes, if it's whatever it is. I know where the best speaker is and how to mic it, or best speakers, how to do it. And so I don't need to use it's faster than going through menus for me, honestly. But the menus and the digital amps are great for convenience. So it's like, if you have the room to have the stuff set up, you have amps in here that are already mic'd up, they're already going in to be recorded. All you gotta do is hit play in Logic or record in Logic, and you can do it. Instant good guitar sound. So
I find it's the excitement of it, not the excitement of setting it up, but the excitement of the volume and the excitement of this feeling that your guitar's you can find the feedback spot. And I know it's possible to do with plugins, especially if you've got some decent, we changed out our monitors we had some more affordable studio monitors, and we changed them for the Genelec ones. And I know we could go way higher than that if we wanted to, but the Genelec ones were relatively expensive. And it was quite a transformative moment, because I was just like, wow, all of our plugins now sound way better.
Yeah.
And now I'm maybe a bit more into it. But I still, you can see the joy on our faces when we're playing. It's like when that decibel meter hits, 105, 110 dB, and it's like you've got a little bit of sustain going on like that. It's just like, oh. And then I accept that people will go, tonally speaking, maybe it's indistinguishable once it's mixed into a track. But what you can't replace is my excitement as a player at that noise, and then maybe I'll play 1% better.
Well, you play based on, I know this, I'll ask you this, but your sound makes you play what you play, and the better you think your sound is, the better you play. That's just a fact. I mean, every guitar player that I know will say the thing: if I have a great sound, I can play great. If I have a bad sound, I can't. And that's just a thing. Now, when I would work with an artist and I'd be in the studio, I want to get a feedback note. Now, there's a couple ways you can get feedback. You put it in front of the guitar, or you can put it in front of your monitor speakers. My NS10s, if they're loud enough and the guitar player puts his guitar up to it, it'll feed back through the monitors. But the play of that, I'm not sure how that works necessarily. I don't play with plugins loud enough to where I can get feedback. You probably can get feedback through the speakers. I'm not sure if you can, but there's something about taming a loud amplifier that is part of rock music that makes it exciting, and that those players that learn to do that, the Eddie Van Halens, that learn to tame a 100-watt Marshall just blasting, or Angus Young, or whoever it is, or Jimmy Page, that can control the beast of that 100 watts pushing the air out. There's something to that.
I'm sort of conscious of sort of trying to think of that sort of killer closing question as the sort of interview feels like it'll sort of beginning to get to its sort of natural end. And I know when we were talking over lunch, we were talking quite a bit about how our children as yet don't seem as interested in the kind of music that we like. And I don't mean as in they don't like music from the 70s. I just mean they're not really listening to, they're not as excited about music generally than we seemed to be. So there's, and this can have a long, expansive answer. It doesn't really matter, but it's like, does it matter? Do you worry? Do you think somehow music needs to evolve, or
it's
where's it
interesting.
going to go? You know.
So my 10-year-old Layla, she was wearing her Nirvana T-shirt at my show the other night, and she came out. I did an intermission, and I said, "Layla, you want to come out?" I asked my 3 kids. I knew that my youngest was the only one that would say yes, but you want to come out and introduce me for the second half? She's like, "Sure." And she goes out there. She got her Nirvana T-shirt on, and kids love Nirvana. This is a thing, you know. Teenagers, they Nirvana hasn't put out a record since. I mean, Kurt Cobain has been gone since 1994, but they haven't put out a record since 1993 yet. Go to Spotify. Nirvana is massively big. But you know who's the biggest band out there from those, you know, Queen, as far as the rock? Queen's got 50, 60 million monthly listeners. My kids know every Queen song. They do. They know Nirvana songs. I mean, so it's really, and they want to wear those T-shirts. My son Dylan was wearing the Swerve Driver T-shirt, which is a band from here that I love. This guitar player and singer Adam Franklin's amazing. They're a shoegaze band, great rock band from the early '90s. They still put out records, and one of my all-time favorite bands. But Dylan was wearing the Swerve Driver T-shirt. Now I don't know if he knows any Swerve Driver music, but but he loves band T-shirts.
We've all got a T-shirt where we don't know any of the songs with the band in it, haven't we?
That's okay. I know the songs. I was like, "Dylan, what are you doing with my Swerve Driver T-shirt on?" And he goes, "Oh, you could never fit in this." And he was right. He was right. I can't fit in any of my old band T-shirts.
So do you? You know, I mean,
that's why I wear black.
Perhaps the conversation we were having over lunch was maybe we were talking about guitar players. That,
yeah.
You know, we were sort of saying that, you know, when was the last time you really felt that you saw a guitar player like Angus Young? And I'm not talking about as a player.
Boy, that's
because there's players out there now who are on another level.
Well, Angus is on another level.
But I mean, as a what do you even call that kind of? No, not as an icon. I mean that energy and persona and the characterization of kind of, you know, as opposed to just standing there playing the guitar.
So I didn't mean to interrupt, but the I think one of the things, and I harp on this on my channel, is that the gridding of music, of rock music, has been really detrimental to it. You know, fixing everything to a grid, basically quantizing the music, starting with the drums, because it's typically done with the drums. Once the drums are quantized, meaning everything is lined up per beat, usually on the 16th note or anything. And there, you know, people can move stuff around to give it feel. But once you've edited the first note or the first phrase, once you start chopping it down into eighth notes or stuff, it starts sounding like a metronome. It sounds like programmed drums. And I always say, if you're going to edit the drums like that, just program the drums to be perfect. And there's plenty of classic records that have programmed drums, from Tom Petty to Tears for Fears that are some of my favorite songs of all time. So no problem with that. But in rock music, when I think of Angus Young and Back in Black, or, you know, For Those About to Rock, or Hell's Bells, or Highway to Hell, those things, the variation in tempos, you know, Back in Black starts at 91, then the first chorus is at 93, then the second verse is 92, second chorus is 94, the guitar solo slows back. I mean, it's just amazing. The give and take of that, the breathing of that, is what makes the music have swagger, vibe, energy. And to me, that connection, along with the backbeat, makes people want to move. And metronomic music, you know, people will dance to it, you know, EDM music, whatever, will dance to it, but rock music needs to have that, it needs to have variation like that, and not be all, you know, monodynamic, rhythmic, whatever it is, if that's even a word. If it isn't, I just made it up.
Yeah.
So,
but I guess I always feel slightly, I realize I become sort of a parody of myself, sounding like my dad probably sounded when I was a kid, and all this kind of stuff. Because I kind of feel like, yeah, I don't genuinely believe that music in any form, or guitar music or any music, is in danger of becoming extinct.
No.
And I think it will just reinvent itself over and over and over again. And actually, it doesn't really matter what the music is, as long as people are still listening to it and experiencing how I felt when I first listened to music. Then I guess it doesn't really matter. But it's always an interesting, you know, it was always better back in our day, you know. And then,
because it was. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. No. And you'll be saying exactly the same to your children and stuff.
And music is, I mean, I have a blast. I love listening to contemporary music, and make it a point to try to listen to new music every day. So
yeah. Oh well. So look, I mean, it's been a pleasure coming in. Yeah, I was going to say, is there anything that you want to, you know, we can stop the cameras or leave the cameras rolling? Is there anything that you, whenever you see an Andertons video, you go, oh, I wonder what that thing is? You've probably tried all this kind of stuff over the years, haven't you? What's the craziest looking thing?
I love the pink Friedman, though. I have to say, I love the color pink there. It looks great.
Well, what other color are you going to get a pink taco in other than pink?
That's right.
That's right.
That's one of the things I think about when in the background of my videos is that, you know, do I have enough color variance in the?
This is so. That's right? The only reason why. It's because you know, there was a point, I think, at one point, I'm looking at a video that's just like, it's just this black wall of nothing. Right. And I was like, we have to just get everything in a different color. That's all it is. It's super vain, isn't it? And then we just wear black tops anyway.
because it's I used to only wear black T-shirts, because then if I would go in and edit, you know, if I came in the next day and I was like, oh, I want to add something to a video, I can just punch in on it. Then I was like, well, my videos were so dark, I couldn't see myself. And so then I started wearing like just a jean shirt over it and everything. So then you could see me differentiated from the background, which is way back then. Instead, it's like, I could just light the background more, and then you can see yourself. But then you see the amps back there. It's like, oh, I need a little more color variance back there. So we're always thinking about these things.
Well, look, it's been a pleasure having you on. I kind of feel like I'm half tempted to just grab a guitar, turn my back to you, play a chord, and ask you to tell me what the chord is, just to see if it's all a lie. Anyway, look, man, it's been amazing having you on.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. You already know where Rick's channel is. You've probably subscribed already, but if you're not, go check it out. It's awesome to watch. Anyway, thank you guys for watching here, and we shall see you in another video soon.